The shaky phone camera captures everything in brutal clarity. A gleaming red Ford F-150 Raptor being dragged onto a tow truck's flatbed, its chrome bumper scraping against metal with a sickening screech. James, dressed in an expensive charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, is screaming at the gate of his own mansion, his knuckles white as he grips the iron bars like a desperate prisoner watching his freedom disappear. "Are you insane? Get your hands off her. That truck is worth more than your pathetic life. I'll sue you. I'll sue the bank. I'll sue this entire city." The tow truck driver doesn't flinch. He's seen this movie before. Rich people losing their toys, thinking money can rewind reality. He turns calmly, holding a clipboard, and his voice cuts through James's hysteria like a knife through silk. "You can sue whoever you want, Mr. James.
But the signature right here, that's yours." The driver rotates the clipboard toward the camera. We zoom in, extreme close-up on a crumpled document, and there it is, James's flowing, arrogant signature in blue ink, the kind of signature that belongs to someone who's never had to read the fine print because he's always been above consequences. James thought he was untouchable. He thought his brother Mike was just another beggar with his hand out, someone beneath him, someone who didn't matter. But James was catastrophically wrong. That red pickup truck wasn't just a vehicle. It was his lucky charm, his origin story, the physical embodiment of everything he'd built. And in about 30 seconds, he's going to discover that one arrogant stroke of a pen over a measly $500 loan just cost him the symbol of his entire empire.
But to understand how a millionaire lost his most prized possession over pocket change, we need to go back. Back to when that red beast meant everything. To truly comprehend the devastation on James's face as he watches his treasure being hauled away, you need to understand what that Ford F-150 represented in his mythology. He called it the Red Beast, and the name wasn't just bravado. This wasn't some truck he bought off a dealer's lot after he made his millions. This was the vehicle he drove 15 years ago when he was nobody, just another guy in work boots making deliveries, dreaming of something bigger. It was inside that cramped cabin, smelling of coffee and ambition, where James signed his first major contract, the deal that changed everything.
He'd tell anyone who'd listen, usually after his third scotch at whatever expensive restaurant he was holding court in, that as long as he owned that truck, he'd never go broke. It was his rabbit's foot, his North Star, his proof that he climbed from nothing to everything. Over the years, even after the money started flowing like champagne at his parties, James poured $80,000 into restoring that truck. Custom paint, rebuilt engine, leather interior that smelled like success. It was more than transportation. It was his crown, his declaration to the universe that he'd made it, and nothing could touch him. 3 months earlier, the story began not with drama, but with something far more dangerous: casual indifference. James sat in his home office, a room larger than most people's apartments, admiring an architectural model of his latest real estate development.
The walls displayed his achievements, framed magazine covers, photos with celebrities, awards he'd bought his way into receiving. He swirled 18-year-old scotch in a crystal glass, the ice clicking against the sides like tiny applause. That's when Mike walked in. Mike looked exactly like what James feared becoming if he'd never escaped their hometown. Worn jeans stained with grease, a flannel shirt with the elbows wearing thin, work boots that had seen actual work. His hands were rough, the fingernails permanently darkened from honest labor. He stood in the doorway like he was afraid to contaminate the expensive carpet. "James, hey, sorry to bother you. My tools broke down on the last job, and there's this contract with the city, renovation work on the municipal building. Good money, but I need $500 for a new toolkit, and the bank requires a cosigner for the loan."
James didn't even look up from his model, didn't make eye contact with the man who shared his blood and nothing else. $500? Mike, seriously, I spend that on cigars without thinking. Why don't you just give up this handyman fantasy and come sweep floors at one of my properties? At least then you'd have benefits. Mike's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed steady. "I like building things, James. I like fixing what's broken. I just need a signature. I'll pay it back in 3 months, every cent."
James laughed, the kind of laugh that doesn't contain humor, only condescension. He reached for his gold-plated pen, the one he used to sign million-dollar deals, the one that probably cost more than Mike's entire toolkit would. Fine, give it here. I'll sign your little paper. But don't you dare let this embarrass me. Don't be late on payments and make me look bad.
James signed the document in less than 3 seconds. His eyes never left his phone screen where he was simultaneously closing a stock trade. The pen scratched across the paper with the casual authority of someone who'd never faced real consequences. He didn't read the terms. He didn't scan the clauses. He didn't notice the section labeled Cross-Collateralization Agreement in 8-point font. Why would he? This was beneath him, a favor to someone he barely respected, a signature he'd forget before Mike even left the room. But if James had looked up for just one moment, he might have noticed something unsettling in Mike's expression. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't relief. It was something else entirely. Calculation, maybe, or the patient look of someone playing a longer game than anyone realized. Mike took the signed document, folded it carefully, and walked out without another word.
The door closed with a soft click that somehow sounded final. Time passed the way it always does for people too busy living to notice they're making mistakes. Weeks turned into months. James attended yacht parties and ribbon cuttings. He bought a high-performance speedboat that he used exactly twice before getting bored. He dated models whose names he forgot by morning. The $500 loan to Mike evaporated from his memory like morning fog, completely irrelevant to his universe of excess. Meanwhile, the bureaucratic machinery of finance was clicking into place, gears turning in bank computers, systems cross-referencing accounts and obligations, waiting for the inevitable moment when arrogance would meet accountability. That moment arrived on a Tuesday.
James, hungover from Monday's celebration of a deal he'd partially negotiated, stood in his kitchen eating sushi that cost more than Mike's weekly grocery budget. His assistant brought in the mail, a stack of correspondence that James usually ignored until quarterly tax time. On top was a red envelope marked Urgent Notice in bold letters. James barely glanced at it before using it as a coaster for his cold-pressed juice, the moisture creating a spreading stain across the official bank letterhead. His phone rang. Another deal, another opportunity to make money while half asleep. "Yeah, buy the shares, buy all of them," he said, pacing past the stained letter without a second look. His assistant picked up the envelope tentatively. James, this letter from the bank." He waved her off like swatting a mosquito. "It's probably Mike being late on that pathetic loan. I'll yell at him later."
"Throw it away." The assistant hesitated but obeyed. The letter went into the trash, unread. Inside that envelope was a warning that James's speedboat insurance payment, a relatively minor amount that had somehow slipped through his chaotic financial management, was 30 days overdue. The letter explained that this default triggered clauses in other agreements he'd signed. The letter specifically mentioned cross-collateralization. The letter gave him 10 days to resolve the issue. James never saw a single word. Arrogance doesn't just blind you. It puts a bag over your head and spins you around until you don't even know which direction danger is coming from. Now we return to that devastating moment. That phone camera still recording. That tow truck still loading. James still screaming, but his voice growing hoarse. Desperate.
He's running now, actually running in his $1,000 Italian leather shoes, chasing the tow truck as it begins to pull away from his gate. His face is red, not from exertion, but from the dawning horror that something has gone terribly, irreversibly wrong. "Stop! Just stop! I'll pay whatever it is. Is it the $500 for Mike? I'll give you $5,000 right now, cash. Just unhook my truck." The driver actually stops. He climbs down from the cab slowly, like a teacher about to explain something simple to a student who refuses to understand. There's pity in his eyes, which somehow makes everything worse. "It's not about your brother's $500, sir. That loan is actually current. Your brother's been paying on time every month." James's face goes from red to pale in an instant.
The confusion is total, complete, the kind of disorientation you feel when the entire world stops making sense.
What? Then why the hell are you stealing my truck? That's my lucky truck. That's my red beast. You can't just take it. The driver pulls out the crumpled document, the same one we saw in the opening, and holds it up like evidence in a trial. Did you read the contract you signed when you co-signed for your brother, Mr. James? There's a clause here called Cross-Collateralization with Solidarity Guarantee. When you signed as a co-signer, you didn't just guarantee his $500 loan. You linked all your assets within the bank's system as mutual collateral. It's a risk management protocol. The computer system detected that you defaulted on your speedboat insurance payment last week.
Since your accounts are now cross-referenced through the cosigner agreement, the bank automatically executed collection on the asset with the highest liquidity value to cover the total exposure risk. That would be your truck, sir. The bank didn't take it because your brother failed. They took it because you did. The words land like physical blows. James actually staggers backward, his hand reaching out for something to steady himself, but finding only air. His mouth opens and closes, but no sound comes out. The realization is crushing, suffocating. He didn't lose his lucky charm because Mike defaulted. He lost it because of his own careless arrogance, because he forgot to pay a stupid insurance bill, because he signed something without reading it, because he thought he was above the rules that govern everyone else.
The red beast, his origin story, his proof of success, his rabbit's foot, gone, not through betrayal, but through his own catastrophic hubris. No, he whispers, then louder. No, not the red beast. I started everything in that truck. Everything I am came from that truck. You can't. But the driver is already climbing back into the cab. The engine rumbles. The truck pulls away, taking James's mythology with it, leaving him standing there in his expensive suit, suddenly looking very small against the backdrop of his oversized mansion. 1 week later, James arrives at the impound lot auction, sweating through his shirt despite the morning chill. He's carrying a leather briefcase stuffed with cash, more cash than most people see in a year, ready to buy back his soul if that's what it takes. The auction is already underway, cars and trucks lined up like prisoners awaiting sentencing.
James spots it immediately. Lot 45, his red beast, somehow looking even more magnificent under the harsh auction lights. He shoves through the crowd, nearly knocking over an elderly woman examining a sedan. Lot 45, he shouts at the auctioneer. The red Ford F-150. I'm here to buy it back. The auctioneer, a weathered man who's seen every variety of human desperation, doesn't even look up from his clipboard. Sorry, Mr. James, that lot closed 10 minutes ago. Single bidder, paid in full, drove off already. James feels his stomach drop into some dark void he didn't know existed inside him. What? Who bought it? Who has my truck? That's when he hears it, the sound that will haunt his nightmares for years, the deep, throaty rumble of the red beast's engine. That specific growl, the one he spent thousands perfecting, the soundtrack to his origin story. He turns in slow motion, already knowing, already understanding, but still hoping he's wrong. The red beast rolls toward him through the auction lot, sunlight glinting off its immaculate paint job. The window descends with that smooth, mechanical whisper. And there, sitting in the driver's seat, where James spent so many formative hours, is Mike. But Mike looks different. He's not wearing grease-stained work clothes. He's got on a clean polo shirt, expensive sunglasses, one arm draped casually over the door, in that universal pose of comfortable ownership. He's smiling. James's voice comes out strangled, barely human. Mike, you bought my truck? You? Mike pats the steering wheel affectionately, the way James used to, the way you touch something you love. Remember when I said I needed that loan for new tools? Well, I bought the tools. Then I worked double shifts, took every job I could find, saved every dollar, and I waited. The smile doesn't fade, but something harder enters Mike's eyes. I knew you'd mess up eventually, James. You're brilliant at making money, but terrible at managing it. You've got 6 credit cards, 3 car payments, boat payments, mortgage payments. You juggle so many obligations that eventually you drop one. I knew it. And I knew you didn't read that cross-collateralization clause when you signed. You never read anything beneath your pay grade. James is shaking now, his hands balling into fists. You planned this? You set me up? You stole my luck? You stole my history? Mike's smile finally disappears, replaced by something colder, harder, more honest. I didn't steal anything, James. I bought this truck legally, at a public auction, for half of what you spent restoring it.
You know what the real theft is? The way you treated me like garbage every time I asked for help. The way you made me feel small for doing honest work instead of playing Monopoly with real estate. You always said this truck was the foundation of your success, that it was your magic charm. Maybe it was, but maybe it was never about the truck. Maybe it was about remembering where you came from, about staying humble, about respecting the work. You forgot all that. You forgot what built you. Mike revs the engine, the sound making James flinch like a slap. This truck deserves an owner who values what it represents. Hard work, integrity, building things that matter. Not someone who sees it as just another trophy to polish while treating his own brother like a charity case.
The red beast pulls away, its tires crunching on gravel, leaving James standing in a cloud of dust that settles slowly, coating his expensive suit in gray film. The other auction attendees watch silently, witnessing the complete dismantling of a man who thought he'd conquered the world. James stands there for almost an hour after the truck disappears, just staring at his empty hands. The same hands that signed that document without reading. The same hands that waved away warnings. The same hands that spent money like water, while forgetting the bills that actually mattered. Later, sitting in his too large house that suddenly feels like a museum of his own arrogance, James finally pulls up the original loan document on his bank's website. He reads it for the first time, every word, every clause. There it is, clear as daylight for anyone who bothered to look.
Cross-Collateralization Agreement, Solidarity Guarantee, Mutual Asset Linkage. The legal language that meant when he signed as a cosigner, he wasn't just vouching for Mike's character, he was weaving their financial fates together, creating a web where his default became Mike's opportunity, where the bank could reach across accounts and seize whatever asset provided the best recovery value. The speedboat insurance payment he forgot was barely $300, an amount James wouldn't notice if it fell out of his pocket. But in the complex machinery of modern finance, that small default triggered protocols, activated clauses, set in motion a chain of events that ended with losing the one possession he actually cared about. Not because the system was unfair, but because he never bothered to understand the system.
He thought he was above it, immune to it, too big to be affected by paperwork and fine print. The universe has a way of teaching expensive lessons to people who refuse to learn cheap ones. James learned what every person who's ever been destroyed by their own arrogance eventually learns. That success without humility is just a countdown to disaster. That treating people as beneath you creates enemies where you could have had allies. That signatures have consequences, whether you read what you're signing or not. He lost his red beast not to bad luck or betrayal, but to his own character flaws. The truck was supposed to be his lucky charm, but luck is just preparation meeting opportunity, and James prepared for nothing except spending what he made. Mike, on the other hand, prepared for everything.
He worked when others rested, saved when others spent, read what others ignored, and waited patiently for arrogance to create opportunity. If you're watching this and thinking, this could never happen to me, you're making the same mistake James made. Every document you signed without reading, every financial obligation you dismiss as too small to matter, every person you underestimate because they're not as wealthy as you, these are all potential red beast moments waiting to happen. The question isn't whether you'll face consequences for carelessness. The question is whether you'll learn before the lesson costs you something irreplaceable. Here's the real twist that nobody tells you about money and success. Accumulating wealth is actually easier than protecting it. Making your first $1 million takes hustle and luck.
Keeping that $1 million takes something harder. Discipline, humility, attention to detail, respect for systems you don't fully control. James had everything except the one thing that mattered. He had money, but no wisdom. Assets, but no understanding. Success, but no foundation. And when you build an empire on ego instead of integrity, eventually someone will find the weakness in your foundation, and the whole structure comes crashing down. Mike didn't destroy his brother. He simply stood in the right place when James destroyed himself. Now, let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about it before you answer in the comments below. Have you ever signed something without reading it? A lease, a loan, a credit card agreement, anything where you just scrolled to the bottom and clicked I agree because the terms seemed too long or too boring? Be honest.
Have you ever vouched for someone financially without understanding exactly what you were agreeing to? Drop your answer in the comments. Tell me about a time when fine print came back to bite you, or when you dodged a bullet because you actually read the contract. Money Stories That Matter exists to share these cautionary tales, because the best lessons are the ones we learn from other people's mistakes instead of our own. The stories might sound extreme, but I promise you, somewhere right now, someone is making the exact same mistakes James made, signing the same careless signatures, dismissing the same warnings, building the same house of cards.
Before we move on, if you're getting value from this story, if it's making you think differently about the documents sitting unsigned on your desk or the financial decisions you've been putting off, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button right now. Money Stories That Matter brings you real financial lessons wrapped in compelling narratives twice a week. We don't just tell you what happened, we show you why it matters and how to avoid becoming the main character in your own financial tragedy. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and make sure you never miss a story that could save you from losing your own red beast, whatever form it takes in your life. The aftermath for James was predictable, but still painful to watch. Without his lucky charm, his confidence evaporated. He started second-guessing deals, questioning his instincts, seeing omens in everything.
The red beast wasn't just a truck. It was his psychological armor, his proof that he'd overcome his origins. Without it, he was just another rich guy with a fragile ego and no center. His business partners noticed the change. His swagger was gone, replaced by a nervous energy that made people uncomfortable. Deals that should have closed didn't. Opportunities that should have materialized evaporated. Whether the truck was actually lucky or whether losing it simply broke something fundamental in James's psyche, the result was the same. His empire didn't collapse overnight, but it began to crack, small fissures spreading like spider webs across everything he built. Mike, meanwhile, discovered something interesting about the red beast. It was just a truck. A nice truck, sure, beautifully restored, fun to drive, but it wasn't magic. It didn't make him suddenly successful or confident.
What it did do was remind him every single day that hard work, patience, and attention to detail eventually pay dividends. Every time he climbed into that cabin and smelled the leather James had obsessed over, Mike remembered that the real prize wasn't the vehicle itself, it was the lesson. The lesson that arrogance creates blind spots, that underestimating people is dangerous, that every action has consequences rippling outward in ways you can't predict. Mike kept working his honest jobs, fixing what was broken, building what was needed. The truck became not a trophy, but a tool, which is what it was always meant to be before James turned it into an idol. The story of James and the Red Beast spread through their business community like wildfire. People love watching the mighty fall, especially when the fall is self-inflicted and entirely avoidable.
But the real lesson got lost in the gossip. This isn't a story about revenge or karma or even justice. It's a story about the cost of not paying attention, about the price of treating people as props in your own success narrative, about what happens when you value symbols more than substance. James lost his truck because he forgot the most fundamental rule of adult life. Read what you sign, pay what you owe, respect the people around you. These aren't complex principles. They're basic. But basic doesn't mean easy, especially when you're intoxicated by your own success. Here's what nobody tells you about being rich. Money amplifies everything about your character, both good and bad. If you're generous, wealth makes you more generous. If you're arrogant, wealth makes you insufferable. If you're careless, wealth gives you more expensive things to be careless with.
James was always arrogant and careless. He was those things when he was poor,
grinding it out in that red truck 15 years ago. But back then, the consequences of his flaws were small. Burned bridges with coworkers, missed opportunities, minor mistakes. Success gave him the resources to make mistakes on a much grander scale, and he enthusiastically embraced that opportunity. The red beast wasn't his lucky charm. It was his last connection to a time when his mistakes couldn't destroy him, when humility wasn't optional but mandatory, when he had to read contracts because he couldn't afford lawyers to fix his errors. When James finally moved on from the loss of his truck, and that took months longer than anyone expected, he did something surprising. He went back to work. Not the glamorous deal-making he'd been doing, but actual physical work.
He bought a modest pickup, nothing special, and started small renovation projects himself. Not managing crews or signing checks, but actually swinging hammers, laying tile, fixing things with his own hands. People said he'd lost his mind, that the loss of the red beast had broken him completely. Maybe it had. Or maybe, for the first time in 15 years, James was remembering what the red beast was supposed to represent before he turned it into a monument to his own ego. The work was hard. His body wasn't used to it anymore. His hands blistered and his back ached, and he went home exhausted every night. But something shifted inside him, something fundamental. The arrogance drained away slowly, replaced by something quieter, something that looked almost like wisdom.
Mike, watching his brother's transformation from a distance, felt something he didn't expect. Not satisfaction exactly, but maybe a quiet hope. The red beast had taught them both lessons, just different ones. Mike learned that patience and preparation eventually create opportunities. James learned that success without substance is just an elaborate house of cards waiting for the first strong wind. Whether either of them would have chosen this path if given the option is irrelevant. Life doesn't offer us choices between lessons and no lessons. It only offers us choices between learning now or learning later, between cheap lessons and expensive ones. The financial mechanism that destroyed James, cross-collateralization, is real, common, and exactly as dangerous as this story suggests. Banks use it constantly.
When you borrow money or co-sign a loan, especially with larger financial institutions, they often include clauses that link your various accounts and assets. The logic from their perspective is sound. If they're taking a risk on you, they want maximum flexibility in recovering their money if things go wrong. From your perspective, it means that defaulting on one small obligation can trigger collection actions across your entire financial life. That forgotten insurance payment, that missed credit card minimum, that co-signed loan you forgot about, any of these can activate clauses that let creditors seize assets that seem completely unrelated. The only defense is the one James refused to deploy. Read everything, understand everything, treat every signature as the potentially life-changing commitment it actually is. I want you to do something right now.
After you finish watching this video, I want you to go through your financial life with fresh eyes. Look at every loan you've co-signed, every agreement you've made, every automatic payment you've set up and forgotten. Read the terms. Actually read them. Every boring word. Understand what you've agreed to. Know what happens if you miss a payment, default on an obligation, or fail to maintain insurance on collateral. This isn't paranoia. This is basic financial hygiene, the equivalent of washing your hands or looking both ways before crossing the street. James thought he was too successful to worry about these details. He's not unique. Thousands of people right now are making the same mistake, assuming their current success means they're immune to consequences. They're wrong. Success doesn't make you immune. It just raises the stakes.
Before we wrap up, I need to ask you something important. Share this video. Seriously. Not because I need views, though I appreciate them, but because someone you know needs to see this. Someone in your life is right now co-signing a loan without reading it, skipping insurance payments because they're too busy, treating signatures as casual inconveniences instead of binding contracts. Someone needs to hear James's story before they lose their own red beast, whatever form it takes. Tag that person in the comments. Send them this link. Make them watch it. The 5 minutes they spend watching this could save them from years of regret. And listen, if you're still watching this far into the video, you're the exact kind of person this channel exists for.
You care about understanding money, about learning from other people's mistakes, about building real financial literacy instead of just chasing the next get-rich-quick scheme. Money Stories That Matter isn't about making you feel superior to James or Mike or anyone else. It's about recognizing that we're all capable of the same mistakes, the same blind spots, the same arrogance. The only difference between James and the rest of us is that his mistakes played out with higher stakes, but the mechanisms are identical. The lesson is universal. So if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, stop right now and click that button. More importantly, commit to watching at least one financial education video per week. Treat it like a vitamin for your financial health. Make it non-negotiable. The saddest part of James's story isn't that he lost his truck. Possessions can be replaced, even symbolic ones. The saddest part is that he had to lose something irreplaceable to learn a lesson that was available for free if he just paid attention. Every financial advisor, every accountant, every lawyer he'd ever worked with had probably told him at some point, read what you sign, track your obligations, don't cosign unless you're prepared to pay. He ignored them all because he thought he knew better. Pride is expensive. Ignorance is expensive. The combination is catastrophic. James and Mike's story continues, though not in ways anyone expected. They're not enemies now, but they're not close either. They exist in that uncomfortable space between estrangement and reconciliation. Two men who share blood and history, but not much else.
Sometimes they pass each other on the street. Mike in the red beast heading to a job, James in his modest truck doing similar work. They nod. They don't stop. Maybe someday they'll actually talk, have a real conversation about what happened and why. Maybe they'll never speak again beyond those brief acknowledgments. The red beast sits between them now, not as a prize or a trophy, but as a 3,000-pound reminder that signatures have weight, that arrogance has costs, that the line between success and failure is often just your willingness to pay attention to details that seem boring until they destroy you. So here's your assignment. Go read something you signed. Pick the scariest one, the one with the most at stake. Your mortgage, your car loan, that business partnership agreement, whatever keeps you up at night when you think about it. Read it all the way through. Make notes.
Ask questions. Hire a lawyer if you need to. Understand exactly what you've agreed to and what could go wrong. Then come back to this video and tell me in the comments what you found. Tell me what clause you missed, what risk you didn't know you'd taken, what potential red beast moment you just discovered. Let's learn from each other. Let's build a community of people who refuse to let arrogance or laziness or busyness turn our lives into cautionary tales for the next generation. The cost of a signature is exactly what you agree it is when you sign. James agreed to terms he never read, made promises he never tracked, created obligations he never understood. The cost turned out to be the one thing he valued most in the world. That's the price of not paying attention. That's what happens when you treat financial documents like they're beneath your notice. Don't be James. Respect the contract. Respect the signature. Guard your red beast, whatever form it takes in your life. Thanks for watching Money Stories That Matter. I'll see you in the next story.